All right, nightcappers. Why is it when America's economy shifts, Black women pay the highest price? Tonight, we're unpacking what the numbers really mean and why it's called the double tax on Black women.
This is NightCap with Dr. Nola Haynes, streaming only on the Persist Network.
All right, nightcappers. I'm your host, Dr. Nola Haynes, your favorite political scientist. Tonight, we're keeping it real like we always do, keeping it global and keeping it cute. But don't get it twisted. The stakes are serious. So grab your glass, silence the group chat, and let's get into this late night convo. This is NightCap. And if you're catching us on YouTube, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Okay, everyone. So tonight on the People's Brief on our A Block, we're doing something a little bit different. You watch NightCap, you know that I have been talking about Black women unemployment for quite some time. Since 19th News came out with that article, once it was announced that 300,000 Black women have been pushed out of the workforce. That isn't just the federal government, which makes up a lot of that unemployment figure. It's in other sectors too. And what's so interesting is that Black women aren't being picked up by other industries. So the New York Times came out with similar reporting to 19th News, although their angle was a little bit different. And this is pretty much the bare bones of it. It says that Black women face the highest unemployment rates across demographics, even though we're historically been the backbone of essential industries like healthcare, education, and service, and not to mention the federal government. And we are the most educated group in the United States. And I would also argue the most capable, but do not get me started. Do not get me on my soapbox, because I can go on and talk about this for a long time. But what's interesting also about that article, while Black women are losing jobs, white men are gaining jobs. So again, I talk quite a bit about this idea, about this current administration thinking that Black women are low-hanging fruit, not because we aren't capable, not because we aren't formidable, but they believe no one will come to our rescue. And also there's that fear factor. We are formidable, but again, who will come to our rescue? So why does this matter? Black women aren't just individual workers. We are often heads of households and the anchors in our communities. When we lose jobs, families and neighborhoods lose stability. Community businesses lose their revenue. It is a snowball effect. So tonight, we're going to get into this conversation around the concept of double tax. I'm really excited to break this down, to see if there's any good news in terms of, what the future may hold, not in terms of like trying to predict what the future may hold, but looking at an economic analysis, kind of like looking at the numbers, looking at the structural barriers that we have to overcome, sexism, looking at entrepreneurship. Is that an option? Is that a real option? Or is it just something people like to, talk about on social media? So tonight, I have a very special guest in A Block, which is why A Block is a little different tonight, who's going to help me break this down. I am so excited to talk to Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman. She's an economist, researcher, author, and co-founder of the Sadie Collective, an organization dedicated to addressing the pipeline and pathway problem that Black women face economically. Hi,
Hello. Anna. Hi, how are you?
I am, girl, day by day. Day by day, sis, day by day.
Listen, it's a little rough out here right now, but I think that you have set a great foundation for the conversation that we're about to have. Thanks so much for having me on.
Definitely. Like I said, Shanti said, y'all need to talk. I was like, okay, we need to talk, bet. So I think we turned this around in a day, and I'm so grateful that you were able to hop on and give us, a few minutes so we can break down this really important this really important topic. So, let's kind of jump into this.
Yeah.
So data is showing that Black women are carrying the heaviest burden in the job market. From your research and advocacy, why does this pattern persist, and what do people miss when they are looking at the headline unemployment numbers?
Yeah, so I think that it's important for us to maybe zoom out a little bit. You mentioned a term that comes from the book that I have coming out very soon on September 16th called The Double Tax. Yes, I'm so excited for y'all to dig into it. It's so good. And I'm biased, of course, but I think it's just like very helpful.
You better be biased. It's your book.
But it's really good in providing language about what this current political and economic moment means and why we should be paying attention to it. So the double tax essentially is the compounded cost of racism and sexism. And that should sound familiar, especially to Black women who pay attention to the literature, because that's really misogynoir, right? And so really, I would say the double tax at its peak is the quantification of misogynoir, what it actually costs us to ignore Black women and women of color more broadly. When we talk about the numbers that are coming in from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and of course the additional analyses that have been done by economists and folks like Katika Roy, there's a lot to unpack here, right? And let's maybe start off by talking about what's taking place. So as you guys know, we have a new president in town, and he has a lot of preferences about how big or small he wants the federal workforce to be in certain sectors. And so that has resulted in thousands of jobs being cut, right? Mm-hmm. Thousands of jobs being cut. And this is already on top of a job market that was kind of sputtering towards the end of last year. The job market was okay, but it was sputtering a little bit. People were a bit concerned. And so what we're seeing now is that there's an unexpected increase in the supply of workers in the job market. So one of the things that people have been asking me is like, Anna, why can't I find a job? Why can't I find a job? It's because maybe back in December, you were competing against 20 other people. Now you're competing against about 100, right? Mm-hmm. So more people are competing for the same job. And this also ends up suppressing wages. So you might also see that like a lot of these jobs are offering lower amounts of compensation. And it's because if you don't want to take the compensation, there's 99 other people who might be willing to, right? And so this is sort of the supply and demand of it all. Now, when we talk about what's going on with Black women in particular, the reality is Black women are seen as expendable. You already nailed it on the head. Expendable in society, but especially in the workplace. I'm going to throw out some statistics to y'all because I think it's important to think about the numbers in light of the stories because the numbers validate the stories, right? So let's start off with the first one. The double tax here is, again, the compounded cost of racism and sexism, and it's going to first show up in career choice. So there's this thing called occupational segregation. It's the idea that certain demographics get pushed towards certain career paths that typically are low paying or low benefits or both, right? And so Black women in particular, because of the compounded cost of racism and sexism, are oftentimes pushed into some of the sectors that you mentioned, Dr. Haynes, where it's, education, health, but they're usually the lower paying jobs in those sectors, the jobs that a lot of these industries will see as, last in, first out, expendable, right? And so that's the first thing that's happening here, where you're finding Black women who are in these types of career paths that are low paid and low benefits. Let me add another wrinkle here because we're talking about the federal workforce cuts. I don't know if folks know this, but Black women make about 7% of our population. They make up about 9% of our federal workforce, according to the Economic Policy Institute. Mm-hmm. That means that we are overrepresented in the places where these cuts are taking place. Mm-hmm. And that's on top of the fact that people already see us as expendable, right? So these cuts are being targeted towards industries that we are disproportionately represented in. In addition to that, we're the ones who are seen as last in, first out. And I would say this is kind of happening at a very, very high level with what's happening with Governor Lisa Cook, right? She was the last person in to the Fed. And guess who's being targeted to get out, right? Okay, so this is not just something that's isolated. It's happening both in your neighborhood, but it's also happening at the highest levels of leadership. The other place the double tax shows up in is career path. So I don't know if folks know this, but Black women are the least likely group to be promoted into any managerial position within the workplace. This is not speculative. This is the facts, right? So for example, Lean In finds that for every 100 men that are promoted, only 54 Black women are promoted at that same level, as compared to 99 Asian American women, or 82 women in general, right? So Black women are significantly below even women in general in terms of promotion rates. And this also is in line with Black women being seen as those who face the highest turnover, Black women facing the lowest promotion rates, and this also being connected to who is deemed low performers. I'm not saying that they're actually low performers, but who's deemed low performers in predominantly white environments. And so when we're talking about the lack of pickup from other industries, well, if it's not popular to, embrace diversity, they're not going to embrace Black women who are exiting the workforce.
Mm-hmm. This was, oh my goodness, thank you so much for through all of that. And unfortunately, I'm experiencing a lot of these consequences from that taxation, right? Because as we were talking, before the show started, it's not just that we're being pushed out, we're not being picked back up. Like specifically with the example of the pipeline from federal government to private industry, that isn't occurring, right? So that's also going to be part of the problem. You mentioned structural barriers. I'm not going to kind of like go into that, but I think that the next question that's on my mind that I want to ask you.
Yes.
Are there any bright spots here that give you hope? Or my fear is it's going to snowball and we're going to see a lot of negative effects, but is there hope anywhere?
Yeah. I mean, let's first start off by the fact that people are talking about this in the mainstream. I think that's a huge page turner, right? In terms of like us talking about Black women as important aspects of our economy. That's something that was not true 5 years ago. And so it's exciting to me that, folks, I say the thinnest silver lining is that people are actually having a serious conversation about the role Black women play. I also think that's what's happening is people are starting to take this very seriously. The way that I've been sort of communicating what's been taking place is, imagine if we said 319,000 breadwinners left the labor force, or 319,000 taxpayers left the labor force, right? These are people who are losing income. And so I think people are starting to connect the dots that you don't want a huge chunk of people who work exiting within within 6 months, especially if they belong to the group of women that work the most, right? Like Black women have the highest labor force participation rate amongst all groups. So in terms of bright spots, there are a couple, right? So I think the first one is that we're talking about this. That's a great bright spot. But I would say the second thing is that I think Black women, one thing that we're really good at is community building. And that's going to be absolutely essential
1,000%
moving forward, right? Mm-hmm. What do I mean by community building? I think Black women are starting to have these more honest conversations about what's happening in their workplace, how much they're getting paid, what it takes to get promoted. And they're starting to, I wouldn't say starting, but like really focusing and honing in on lifting each other up. I think if you're a Black woman who remains in the workplace, you should be seeking out other Black women, being like, you good, sis?
Right.
Is there anything I can, how do we ensure that like your job is protected? Because as you mentioned, we tend to be the breadwinners, especially for mothers. So it's not just that when we leave the labor force, it's a loss of income. It's a loss of familial income. It's a loss of household income. People who rely on us essentially need us to be making money. And so community building within and outside of the workplace, to me, makes a lot of sense. I think if you're in college, you should be paying attention, to which jobs are being seen as expendable. I always tell folks that, for sure, pursue your passion, for sure, do the things that you're good at, but also be strategic, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're doing is really tied to the labor market demand. What is the labor market demanding, right, in terms of skills? And what I would encourage a lot of Black women to do is, if you feel like you're lacking in technical skills, data management, data analysis, these are where this is where the money is. I'm going to be very frank with you. Even getting a little bit of training in that gives you an edge, right? I would say the last thing I would say is the book offers a lot of solutions across our entire lifetime. And these all seem like kind of disparate as we're talking about it. But what happens with your first paycheck, will trickle down into whether or not you have a benchmark for when you get promoted, right? What happens with what another Black woman's retirement, savings account looks like will affect yours. And so I think it's really important that we continue to have this conversation. We continue to support one another, both in and outside of the workplace, but we also are strategic about the ways that we're upskilling to ensure that we don't give them another reason rather, to kick us out of our jobs.
So here's where I would push back just a little bit, because I think it's a great frame in terms of how racism and sexism are playing out here, even more so now because so many corporations feel like they can, I have this belief that they got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2.5 seconds because they didn't really want it in the first place. I'm just keeping it a buck. So I feel like, yes, you can be strategic about your training. Yes, do more STEM, do more data. But at the end of the day, when the structural barriers are really around sexism and racism, you can have all the skills and all the receipts.
Very true.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, we also have to deal with other people's racism, other people's sexism. So as we are the most educated group in the country, Black women got masters coming out from everywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So yes, the onus is on us in a way to be strategic about what those degrees are in, because I can tell you as an academic, there are majors that are being done away with, which means they just there's no place for them any longer inside the workforce, right? Yep. So yes, that is part of it, but the onus isn't strictly on us.
It's not. It's not.
We're going up against decades and centuries of racism and sexism, and now they are. What's the word I'm trying to find? I feel like a lot of these folks who didn't want us there in the first place, they feel emboldened now.
100%.
They don't have to comply to diversity, equity, inclusion. They're not worried about little pesky lawsuits because we're not probably going to win anyway. Or, so how do you speak to that? Like, is entrepreneurship an answer to that?
This is a really great question. And I appreciate you pushing back. I want to clarify that I don't think that the onus falls on Black women to fix everybody else's racism and sexism. I just want to make that very clear. But I think that it's important to recognize what we have control over, right? Which is, whether or not we are even competitive in the labor market in general. And I'm not saying also don't study the social sciences and also like the humanities. I actually think we need them in the workplace more, considering what's going on, right? But of course, the people in charge don't think that. But I just want to go ahead and clarify. The question of whether or not entrepreneurship is the answer is a little tricky, because even amongst the diversity funding that's available, typically, that diversity funding has disproportionately gone to white women. So I think that, again, I come back to community because I feel like that's really going to be the foundation of it's the foundation historically of how Black folks in general, especially in this country, have navigated difficult political and economic periods. But I would also say too that, like, to me, community looks like if there's a Black woman who wants to pursue entrepreneurship, everybody shows up, right? Everybody supports. I think that is important. We kind of saw that during Beyonce's Cowboy Carter tour, where a lot of folks were creating merchandise for the tour, and lots of fans, specifically Black women, actually ended up supporting lots of Black women entrepreneurs. And I think like that's the way I would see entrepreneurship really playing a role here, that the Black dollar clearly can pressure a CEO of a major corporation to step low. So why would it not be able to also empower the Black community economically? So I think that if we're talking about entrepreneurship, the Black dollar is extremely important here, especially now, given all of the diversity funds that have now disappeared in the last few months, right? Given the current change in leadership. I think the other thing too that I want to mention is that if you're part of a organization or a company or a institution that has a union, join it, right? Please join your union. Your union is going to protect you, right? If you're a Black person in general, you will have higher wages if you're part of a union. If you're a Black woman in particular, higher wages if you're part of a union. Unions are meant to protect the worker's interest. I want to make it very clear that where you're working, like the HR, I'm someone who studies diversity in the workplace. Right now, talent acquisition and development, for the sake of the current timeline. Right. But HR's function is really to protect the company, really to protect the institution. They're trying to avoid lawsuits. They're working in line with legal. Unions are specifically for the people who are working at the institution, especially if you're vulnerable and you can join a union. It's your best bet because they have legal offerings. They can also provide financial support, but also you are able to negotiate and it's collective bargaining, right? You guys work together to bargain better things for your own conditions at work. So once again, this theme that keeps coming through is community. I think a lot of people think there's a silver bullet solution that will solve these structural barriers. And for me, I think it's actually a lot of these moments of community coming together, but also going over time that will actually make a dent in the long run.
I love that. I'm so happy that we talked about unions coming off of Labor Day weekend. Right. And it is really the backbone of unemployment in this country, right? So I love that advice to join unions. Sisters, you hear? Okay, so join unions is one takeaway I got. And secondly, there are all these LLC folks everywhere on social media telling everybody to become an entrepreneur. You just wake up and magically you're an entrepreneur. There are levels to this, but it's about building that community because it needs to be that community to support your entrepreneurship. Anna, I love this conversation. I know you have a hard stop. I do not want to take up any more of your time, but I hope you will come back so we can continue this conversation as this story develops, because right now it's 319,000.
It's going to be a lot larger. It's by Friday, which is the next jobs report. Yep.
Exactly.
So why? So it's likely that the jobs, because right now the BLS commissioner is out. So we actually don't know what the jobs report is going to look like.
That part.
That's the reality, but you can bet your bets that it's going to be a lot higher than 319,000.
Absolutely. So I want to keep having this conversation with you. I hope you'll come back and spend some time with us. And thank you for being so flexible at the last moment. I really wanted to have a conversation. And thank you for stepping into this void. Thank you, sis. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sis. Again, this is a fantastic platform. I hope you guys will tune in and make sure you grab your copy of the Double Tax. This is the kind of book that allows us to understand the moment.
How can we find you? I'm so sorry.
No, it's totally fine. So I'm on the interweb. So you can find me on Blue Sky or Instagram at It's Afronomics, ITS Afronomics. I talk about a lot of things that you might care about with respect to the economy. And then if you're interested in the topics that we're talking about today, you might want to check out The Double Tax, my book that's coming out on September 16th, that explores how the individual costs that women of color, especially Black women, deal with today become societal costs for everyone else tomorrow. So make sure that you check that out too.
Thank you so much, Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will catch up with you next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye. All right, NightCappers. Listen, the bottom line is this. Black women can't keep paying a double tax in America's job market. After the break, we'll hear what solutions could look like in terms of why running for office is important. We will introduce you to Dr. Annie Andrews, a pediatrician who's taking on Senator Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, y'all. This is a spicy race because Lindsey Graham has been in that seat for 22 years. And the way that Dr. Annie Andrews is using her social media, the way that she's going head first at Lindsey Graham while he does things like supports the militarization of DC, Dr. Annie Andrews is like, well, okay, you're busy doing that, but let's talk about the issues that are going on here in South Carolina. Where are you on those issues? So it's going to be, I'm really excited about that. So now that we've been talking about how the economy is leaving Black women behind, that battle in South Carolina is definitely going to reshape Washington. NightCap is powered by Persist. Want more smart, unbothered commentary where politics meets culture? Subscribe to Persist Substack and YouTube and never miss the tea. Now we've been talking about how the economy is leaving Black women behind, but there's another battle happening in South Carolina, one that could literally reshape Washington. I sat down with Dr. Annie Andrews, a pediatrician, a mom who's now running for U.S. Senate against Lindsey Graham. She told me why she's stepping out of the exam room and into the political fight. Let's go to that conversation.
All right. So I am so grateful that Dr. Annie Andrews has taken the time to sit down with me on NightCap. I am such a huge fan, first and foremost.
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. I appreciate that.
And I think our first conversation was that quick live we did the night Senator Booker. Was it the night that Senator Booker finished his 20 hour?
That's right. Yeah.
And we did a Persist live.
That's right. On Instagram. Yep.
Yep. And that was the first time that I had actually interacted with you, but I've been a social media fan for quite some time. So let's jump right into this because I know your time is limited. What inspired you to run against Lindsey Graham?
It's my work that I've done for 20 years as a pediatrician in children's hospitals and my role as a mom of my own 3 school-age children. I was, not inherently a political person growing up. I had this privilege to not be political. And once I became a mom, my whole perspective on the world shifted and I found myself eager to fight for the world I know my children deserve. My youngest daughter was actually born 6 days before Donald Trump was elected in 2016. So that was a huge wake-up call for me because there I was staring at my beautiful baby girl's newborn face, thinking Hillary Clinton's going to be elected, watching the results of that election. So it was like a real gut check moment for me. And of course, I had the newborn mom, hazy emotions, all of it, hormones, everything. So it was a really tough time for me. And in those moments, in those days after he was elected, I realized that I was going to have to get more involved in building the future my children need and deserve. And then I got off the sidelines further after the Parkland shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, because that was the first mass school shooting I experienced as the parent of a school-age child, a sentence only a parent in America has to say. And, I just got further and further involved in advocacy, and I ran for Congress against Nancy Mace back in 2022. And even though I lost in that deeply gerrymandered district, I didn't go away. I got louder. I still am so deeply passionate about getting voices like mine, voices of mothers, of pediatricians in these rooms where decisions are made, because America's children continue to be left behind. And then once, Trump was reelected in, 2020, I knew I was going to not stay on the sidelines this time. Lindsey Graham is a career corrupt politician who has no business serving another term in the U.S. Senate. Running for office is something I know how to do. It's something I can do well. And it's a way that I personally can fight back and fight for South Carolinians.
Speaking of that, I have so many questions to ask you, but one of the videos, I want to get this date right. Let me see. One video that you made specifically is when Lindsey Graham was on Fox News saying that he basically supports militarization. And you did a stitch and he was like, oh, really? But here's what's going on where we live. So my question is, we're both part of the Persist Network. And there are a lot of political influencer voices in that space. Talk to us about how your social media profile has elevated through your political life. Because right now you are everywhere and your social media is a go-to. How is that factoring into your campaign?
It's a huge part of my campaign strategy and my messaging strategy because, like you, as members of the Persist Network, I understand the value of meeting people where they are, and people are on social media, and we need voices like ours everywhere people are, on their screens when they pick up their phone at night, when they're sitting in the car drop-off line in the morning. We have to be there saying what needs to be said. So my social media audience has grown significantly. When I finished my campaign against Nancy Mace, I had 8,000 followers on Instagram, and now I have like 110,000 followers. And I think, one of the reasons is because I'm in this campaign against a national villain, Lindsey Graham, but the other is because I consistently post content. I don't hold back. I don't pull punches. I present myself as a real human being, not some buttoned up, talking point politician. And I just say what needs to be said. And you and I both know people are so hungry for that. They want to see Democrats with fight in them. And there's just, I posted a really emotional video yesterday after the tragic shooting in Minneapolis. And I did get a little bit of feedback, like, you need to project strength. You're auditioning to be a senator. And I reject that, because I'm going to present myself as fully me. And yeah, not every video I'm going to be on the brink of tears. But when children were just shot praying at their school, I'm going to show up the way I feel. And, I'm unabashed about that. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I see social media as a huge part of breaking through, getting people excited to turn up and vote, which is exactly what we need them to do.
Absolutely. And I 1000% agree with you. There's this this conversation that's happening on Blue Sky about the consultant class regarding Dems and how Dems rely too much on what they say and what the safe talking points are and what they aren't. But I think we have enough evidence that people want real people.
Yes.
We're not going back. We're not going back to a time where, using Senator Booker, for example, when he still tries to appeal to his colleagues on the other side, their humanity and their morality, that train has left the station. Right. And you represent something different. You resonate with people. You speak to moms. And that video yesterday, I'm happy you brought it up. I wasn't going to bring it up unless you brought it up. I went to Catholic school from pre-K to 8th grade.
Me too.
You know what I mean? Like, that was my parents dropping me off. And, I was very emotional about it yesterday. So say a little bit more about those folks who kind of like tapped you on your shoulder and it's like, you're being a little bit too human. Like, how can you use that actually and bring people in to support you even more? You understand what I'm getting?
Yeah. Yes. Like, I didn't start it because it was a strategy, but I see that it's working as a strategy to show up 100% as me and to show that human side of me. And it's bringing people who aren't normally drawn to politics into politics. And for that reason, I'm going to continue doing it. When I see people at campaign events, when they meet me in person, they say, you're exactly who I thought you were. You're just like you are on social media. And to me, that is a huge compliment. But, yesterday was a difficult day, just like every school shooting is for parents of school-age children and for everyone with a heart in this country. It was particularly difficult for me because I've been on the campaign trail for 3 months, and I've been on this long stretch of not seeing my kids for, day after day after day. So I hadn't seen them in several days. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, the ages of the 2 children who died yesterday, in addition to a 13-year-old. And I was just already feeling really emotional about missing my kids, which is a normal human emotion. And then when I saw that news, it was just really difficult. So last night, I had the privilege, because my children came home alive yesterday. I laid in bed with my 8-year-old at bedtime, and she just fell asleep with like the full weight of her on me. And I started crying. I'm in this for my kids. I'm in this for all these kids, and hiding my emotion or bottling up my emotion is doing nobody any favors, because we all have righteous indignation right now, and we need to use it and we need to show it. And we know it's working because we see the politicians that are breaking through, and it's the ones that are authentically communicating.
Absolutely. So let's dig a little deeper into your background. I know people that follow you probably know your background as a pediatrician, but how does that work in the politics realm? Why does that make you a stronger, better candidate, especially in this time of anti-science, anti-STEM?
That's exactly why I believe that I am such a strong, effective candidate in this moment, because we find ourselves in this unprecedented anti-science environment with RFK Jr. leading the Department of Health and Human Services. And I seriously can't even keep up with the headlines and the things that he's saying and the things that he's doing to destroy our nation's healthcare system, inject all of this distrust into our public health system. The damage that man has already done in the few short months he's been in that position will take physicians and other healthcare professionals decades to recover from. No matter if he ever actually removes vaccines from the market, the distrust he is sowing is so deeply disturbing because children will die. Children will die of preventable disease because of RFK Jr. There's one pediatrician in the U.S. Congress right now. That's Dr. Kim Schreier, who represents Washington's 8th District. She was first elected in that 2018 midterm wave election. And she is an incredible champion for children, but we should have more than one pediatrician in Congress. How many lawyers do we have in Congress? So it's never been more important for doctors and other folks with STEM backgrounds to consider running for office, even in these really high profile national races like I'm doing. If I can do it, you can do it. Beyond that, we also just need to use our platforms, grow our own social media audiences to push back against this anti-science rhetoric we're seeing, because vulnerable parents out there who just want to do what's best for their children, they see a wellness influencer, speaking complete disinformation, and they don't know what's up and down anymore. This is such an urgent moment. So there's never been a more important time for doctors, pediatricians, healthcare professionals, scientists to run for office. If you're not going to run for office, at least use your voice to fight back against this dangerous anti-science moment we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. And, I was talking to I'm going to mention 2 interviews. I was talking to Joel Rubin about this term that I came up with, political commentator influencer. And I thought about this term because the media landscape has changed so much, Annie. It's not about the vetted, credible people on national news anymore. It's about your favorite influencer, your favorite content creator. So to your point, I am a political scientist. I have foreign policy experience, security experience. Yet, I may say something and no one listens, but you're going to listen to your favorite influencer regardless of what their background is, right? So that's one part of it. The second part is I also had this amazing conversation with Dr. Anu Kumar, who runs iPass. So this situation is global with the health crisis, right? With us backing out of U.S. foreign aid. There was a story just yesterday about Malawi and how bad the tuberculosis problem is and how bad it will be by next month. So what I love about you is you're right. We need more doctors because this isn't just domestic. It's also global.
That's right. And, I think what you're highlighting is the breadth of this crisis and the power of our country's influence on the health and well-being of people all across the globe. And all of the ways that we have abandoned and abdicated our responsibility to promote global health. And I think it's really easy for people these days to stick to their lives, to put their heads in the sand, to not think about the damage and the devastation and the preventable suffering that is happening because of decisions the Trump administration has made. And, even if we're not compelled because of our own personal sense of morals or empathy, this is you're an expert in this. This is a national security problem when negatively impact global health and global well-being in the way that the Trump administration has. We have a selfish interest in, what the USAID program did before it was destroyed. There's a lot of headlines right now about the CDC and top scientists either resigning or, refusing to leave, but sounding the alarm about lack of transparency, the anti-science. RFK Jr. doesn't know a thing about actual science, the practice of medicine, or statistics. And so the CDC, which is an incredibly important institution in our country, but also across the globe, is just like involuting right now. And, I can't understand people who are keeping their heads in the sand. And, I think part of it is we've become so numb to these headlines, but we've got to wake up. We've got to wake up because the midterms will be here before we know it. And a lot of people say, and I tend to agree, this might be our last chance. This might be our last chance to take back the House, to take back the Senate, to put a stop to some of this chaos that the Trump administration has implemented and to get this country on the right track. Because if we don't win in 2026, where are we going to be in 2028? I don't know.
I completely agree with you. And that is from my professional opinion as a political scientist. Trump has, he has telegraphed more than once that he wants term limits extended. But, South Carolina has voted for Lindsey Graham over and over and over, Annie. I know why you stand out. How are you going to break through to folks who continuously vote for the march towards authoritarianism, supporting a dictatorship, supporting militarizing the nation's capital. What is it that people hear in South Carolina that they want to support that? You have a very different message. Why do you think you're going to be able to break through?
Because I have to. This moment is so urgent. And I understand Democrats can't use the same playbook that we've used in the past. We've got to shake things up and do things differently, run different kinds of candidates, and just meet people where they are. But why South Carolina continues to elect Lindsey Graham, there's a lot of answers for that question. I think people are waking up to the fact that he is not the man he was when he was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2022,
Great.
22 years ago. Yeah. 2 years ago. He's changed his position on every issue. I probably never agreed with him on any substantial policy issues, but he was a man of integrity, most would say. He said what he would do. You know, his words aligned with his actions. That is not him anymore. He has been so bold as to say into a microphone he doesn't need to hold town halls in South Carolina because he's in D.C. to do what Donald Trump tells him to do. Now, you're a political scientist, so you understand I don't have to appeal to the far right part of the Republican Party. Those folks are never going to put their little green check next to my name not because of who I am, but because I have a D behind my name. And that's just the reality of politics in this country. I don't have to appeal to them. I have to focus my campaign on the center 20% and get a few folks on the center right to feel comfortable voting for a Democrat, maybe for the first time in their lives. And that is where my head's at. That doesn't mean I'm like abandoning any of my Democratic positions. To me, it's not about where we are on the ideological spectrum. It's about the way we communicate and the strategies we use to communicate and the person who is running. You know, I am literally a suburban mom of 3 school-age kids who drives a beat-up old Ford Explorer and is not interested in a career in politics because I guarantee being a pediatrician has higher job satisfaction than being a U.S. senator, but I'm interested in solving problems. And I'm offering South Carolinians something different, something they haven't had in 22 years, which is a senator who will be in Washington, D.C. to fight for them, not to fight for my own political career. So I just have to be consistent and persistent with my messaging. I think this gets back to me presenting myself as a whole human being and not just a buttoned up politician who's seeking the title of senator. And I think all of those things are going to align in this moment where we're going to have hopefully this huge backlash election cycle. Folks are going to write off this South Carolina Senate race because they think it can't be done in the South. But I would say Andy Beshear would have something to say about that. I would say that folks in Georgia would have something to say about that. And folks up north in North Carolina would have something to say about that. Democrats can win statewide in the South if we have strong candidates who are willing to do the work, to fundraise, and to communicate effectively. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I have been screaming for years. We need a real Southern strategy, folks. I'm never going to abandon the South as a Southerner. Yes, it's problematic as hell, you know, and even, you know, where you're from, the neck of the woods where we are from, there has always been very, very challenging and complicated race relations. And that's also going to continue to factor into elections going forward as long as we can have them, right? So what is your on the ground strategy? Are you talking to people? Are you everywhere in South Carolina talking to different communities? Tell us a little bit about your ground strategy.
Yes. And thank you for this question. And this is why second-time candidates are often so much better than first-time candidates, because I learned so many lessons the first time I ran. You know, I didn't necessarily have the funds to have an effective ground game back then, but it wasn't our focus. And I have a different team this time. I have a team that is rooted in South Carolina, that represents the demographics of my state, that has deep connections in all 46 counties. You know, we have a political director on the ground who's been running statewide campaigns in South Carolina for presidents and for governor's races for decades. I have a faith outreach leader that has this incredible plan that's going to get me in front of congregations all across the state, not just once in October, but starting now, so that I can engender trust and so that I can develop real relationships with these folks, so that I can show up and listen before I just talk and tell them what I think that they want to hear. And so, yes, like a huge part of our operation is going to be that on the ground 46 county strategy. And that's why the fundraising piece is so important, because as you know, that all costs money, you know, to hire these folks to do this work. But I can't win a statewide race in South Carolina without an effective ground operation, because we've got to meet voters on their doors. We got to be in their mailboxes, on the radio, on TV, but we've got to be knocking on doors and showing up, listening, and then saying not just what we're against, but what we will fight for and what we stand for.
Absolutely. Because I can tell you, I canvassed in Charlotte and in some, Black suburban areas, some other non-Black areas, but in the Black community, I can tell you over and over, people were happy to see us, but at the same time, they're like, oh, checking their watch. That's right. It's time to vote. Right. So we show up 5 minutes before you have to go to the ballot box. Right. So I'm glad that you recognize that it's about building trust. So many Americans stayed home. And I think that is the number that you're talking about, how to break through, how to reach those disaffected Americans. But I will say that this Trump administration doesn't do itself any favors. But I feel like because we're so online, we know that. But if you're watching Fox News every day, Annie, you're getting a very different picture of what's going on in the country. I am sitting in Southeast DC right now. I can promise you there's no mass shootings happening every 2.5 seconds. I can promise you that I feel quite safe in DC. But if you're watching Fox News, that's not the picture you're getting. How do you break through to the Fox News crew? How do you break through that?
God, that's such an important question. And you're right. I mean, you can, when you're talking to a voter or talking to somebody at, a town hall or something, you can tell immediately when you start the conversation if they're one of those people who only gets their information from Fox News. And, I spend some time in DC because I work very part-time at Children's National Hospital up there. And my apartment's on 14th Street, where they've had all these National Guard troops and all these traffic stops, and like literally outside the Jenny's ice cream and the Madewell and the Trader Joe's. I mean, it is so ridiculous. But that's not what they're portraying on Fox News. They act like 14th Street is this crime infested area. It's a lovely neighborhood with families.
It really is. I was there yesterday.
Yes. So, I think we have to accept the reality that so many people's source of information does not provide them with accurate information. We have to drop our judgment and our resentment about that and meet people where they are. And I do think my experience as a pediatrician serves me really well in this capacity, because when I work as a pediatrician in children's hospitals, I walk into a hospital room. Usually I've never met that child or family because I'm just seeing them when they're admitted to the hospital. And in a matter of minutes, I have to develop a sense of trust with the parents, no matter what their background is, no matter what their political leanings are, what their socioeconomic status is, what the child's insurance status is. I meet them where they are. I show up and I listen, and then we together develop a plan. And it's the same thing with politics. Voters just want someone who shows up. They want someone who will fight for them. And again, I'm not talking about the intractable, deep MAGA voters. I'm talking about the people who are having a hard time making ends meet, who see their rural hospital in South Carolina closing, who see, their special needs sibling getting their Medicaid taken away, who understand they don't have food stamps anymore, who are worried about getting their Social Security and Medicare benefits. Those people are just looking for someone to fight for them. And I'm going to show up in a nonpartisan way to have a non-threatening conversation with these voters, just like I do in hospital rooms.
I love that. So I just have 2 quick things before we let you go, because you are a booked and busy lady. What's the one thing you want South Carolinians to really know about you that they may not know? We know the details. We know you're a pediatrician. We know you're a mom. We know why you're in this fight. But what's something that they may not know about you?
I want people to learn that I am a woman of my word, and I am going to be one of the hardest workers they've ever seen. I didn't get to where I am in life as a pediatrician without being a really hard worker, a really goal-oriented person, and a solutions-oriented person. And I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. I am guided by a very strong moral compass and North Star that is what is best for America's children. And my plea to South Carolina voters is, if you've never voted for a Democrat, give me a chance. Give me a chance. And I promise you, number one, we're in the land of Nancy Mace. So first I have to say I won't embarrass you. And number two, every vote that I take as a U.S. Senator will be the vote that benefits American children. So what damage could I do in 6 years? Give a Democrat a chance for one term, see what I do, see the difference in having someone who will fight for you rather than fight for themselves in Donald Trump. And let's work together to make South Carolina the state that we all know it can be.
I love that. And what I hear you saying, what I hear Dr. Anna Andrews saying, Americans, is that there's no flip-flopping. You're going to get what you see. There's no allegiance to something larger than your state and to the Constitution, and that you're a hard worker, that you're a fighter. You believe in a Constitution.
Right. That's just so radical, Nola.
Before you get out of here, tell people how they can find you and support your campaign.
Thank you. DrAnnieAndrews.com is our campaign website. You can read more about me there. You can sign up to volunteer. We need volunteers all across the country to text bank, to phone bank, and local volunteers to knock on doors. And also, I need donations from all across the country. Lindsey Graham has $15 million in the bank. I'm working hard every day to raise as much money as I can. I've raised over $2.1 million already, which I'm incredibly proud of, because that is really hard work. And people want to write this off, but this is a people-powered movement. I need folks all across the country to be a part of it. So go to DrAnnieAndrews.com, sign up to volunteer, donate, and then if you actually want to have some fun, follow me on social media. I promise you won't be disappointed. Annie Andrews MD on most platforms. I'm also on TikTok, easy to find. Follow along, and let's show people that we're ready for a new kind of candidate, and that things, we can win as Democrats in the South. This is a huge opportunity for Democrats across the country to build this kind of strong, people-powered campaign in South Carolina.
Absolutely. I am so grateful to you. You definitely are a different type of candidate, and I'm happy you are. Like I said, we're not going back, we're going forward. And what's going to get this country back on the right track, back on a right progressive track, is authenticity.
Yes.
It's people showing up, being themselves. Not that, you can relax behind closed doors sort of thing. No, show up as you are. That's what people want. That's what people are screaming loud for. And I believe you are the person to be part of that pivotal change. I truly do. And I'm truly grateful to you. You are very much supported here on NightCap whenever you want to come back. And we wish you well and we wish you luck. Thank you so much, Dr. Anna Andrews.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, NightCappers. I am just in awe of Dr. Anna Andrews. Incredibly powerful words coming from her. Whether she has her doctor's coat on in the exam room or on the campaign trail, she's making it clear that families deserve better than a politics of lobbyists and special interests. Tonight, we connected the dots. This is what we do here on NightCap. We connect the dots. Black women are still paying a double tax in America's job market. And in South Carolina's families are demanding leaders who will fight for them, not against them. These struggles are connected because when Black women and working families win, everybody wins. And talking to Dr. Annie about her ground strategy, knocking on doors, spending time in communities, not just showing up 2 minutes before, it's time to vote. It's about that ground game. It's about being in community. It's about that connectivity. Before we go, one quick thing that I want to do before we go. I want to talk a little bit about an article that came out in Wired that's been all over social media. I've been paying attention. It was written by Taylor Lorenz on August 27th, and it kind of exploded. And the reason why I care about this is because people that I know are mentioned in this. People like Elizabeth Booker Houston. Elizabeth Houston. Did I get Elizabeth Booker Houston? Yeah. I'm sorry, Liz. Suzanne Lambert, Eliza Orleans, folks that I actually know in real life are mentioned. I think V was mentioned, but what's interesting about this is that it's been Liz Booker that's been getting a lot of the heat. My position is this. First of all, content creation costs money, not just physical currency, your time and your talent, and that absolutely should be compensated. And content creation is kind of like the wild, wild west of investigative journalism to a degree. I'm not saying they are the same. Do not twist up my words. What I'm saying is you show up with your equipment, you try to, grab a person to talk to, and then you go off and you do your research, and then you create, your detailed based story around, talking to people, and then the actual facts and details that kind of flesh out the story. There are all different types of content creators. I specifically have the way that I talk about the group of folks that I'm affiliated with are called political commentator influencers, which are people that have expertise in certain backgrounds and they care a great deal about detail and facts. And that's where Liz Booker comes in. Liz Booker cares so much about what she's giving to the people. She's going to give you details. She's going to give you facts. She's going to give you a solution. She's going to give you a number, your congressional numbers to call. Liz puts in the time. And not only that, the way that she was singled out in this article, as if, how dare this Black woman deserves to get paid for anything that she is creating. This article made getting $8,000 from Chorus nefarious and dark, while on the right, they get money from God knows where, and I'm being honest about this. This isn't hyperbole. This is actually one of the reasons NightCap exists, to be able to break through the manosphere that is propped up by a lot of funding. We are not. So to me, it was laughable that this was even a conversation, that it was something dark and nefarious, and that these content creators, even though in the article they did list some folks who said that something about it seemed sketchy. I don't know specifically what seemed sketchy. I am not in Chorus. I am here just talking about my good sis, Elizabeth Booker Houston, who has a beautiful heart, a beautiful soul. She is giving of her time. She is giving of her platform. And the one thing that upset me the most is that people came for her as if she has some sort of special interest. The special interest that Liz Booker has is informing the public. She doesn't have to do that. She is a mom. She is a wife. She is a lawyer. She is a scientist. She's booked and busy, especially as a comedian. She doesn't have to do this. I'm going to use my own personal language. I personally feel she is called to do this. She's really good at it. So I personally believe that a lot of people are coming at her simply out of jealousy. It's just that simple. She's good and effective at what she does. So I just wanted to say, Liz, keep up the work that you are doing. You deserve to get paid over and beyond $8,000. And I know you have multiple, income streams that you are very vocal and very honest about. And I want to thank you for your honesty. I want to thank you for your fact checking. I want to thank you for being a good human being. And I want to thank you for doing something very interesting and new and fresh in this lane. So I just wanted to take out a few minutes just to say that. I saw all the content creator homies coming, basically saying what you're not about to do is ... What you're not about to do is come for Liz Booker. So shout out to, I think I saw Jolly saying something. I saw Suzanne Lambert saying something, so folks are really out there supporting Liz, and we got you, sis. All right. So Black women's voices matter, our work matters, and our votes matter. The system may not have been built for us, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting to change it. I want to say thank you to my guest and my A block, which I typically give you 2 or 3 stories of current events, to Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman and the wonderful Dr. Annie Andrews for joining me. It was an incredible episode. We felt like the story about Black women was so important that we gave it all of A block. All right, y'all. If you got value out of tonight's NightCap, leave us a comment or like on the Persist Substack, YouTube, or wherever you listen to NightCap. I am Dr. Nola Haynes, your favorite political scientist. See you in the comments.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Persist on Substack, YouTube, and Instagram.